Hello, this is Pinnacle Webinar Series Episode 42. It's the long term care conversation, adding life to your years. Hello and welcome, and I'm Dr. Greg Green, and today we're going to talk about a subject that many people would rather avoid than actually having a conversation about it. It's not particularly exciting, it's not something most people want to think about, and yet it may be one of the most important conversations you can have when planning your future. Today, we're going to talk about long term care. More specifically, we're going to talk about why you should consider how you would pay for long term care before you actually need it. Now, I want to make something very clear from the beginning. This is not an insurance sales presentation by no stretch of the imagination. My goal is education. I want you to understand what long term care is, why it matters, and what it can potentially do to your retirement plan, and why having a strategy is so important. Whether that strategy ultimately involves long term care insurance, another form of insurance, personal savings, family resources, or some combination of strategies, the important thing is have a plan. Because hoping you won't need long term care is not the same thing as planning for a possibility that you might. Now, exactly what is long term care? Let's begin with a simple question. What is long term care? Many people hear the term and immediately think that's nursing home insurance, but that's not really the whole picture. Long term care is generally about assistance with activities of daily living and other ongoing support when someone can no longer fully care for themselves independently. That care can potentially take place in several different settings. It could be provided in your own home. It could be involved in an assisted living community. It can involve the memory care setting. It could involve a nursing facility, or it can involve family members providing some or all of the care. And that's an important distinction. Long term care isn't necessarily about a building, it's about the need for ongoing assistance. You might need help bathing, dressing, eating, moving from one place to another, using the bathroom, taking medications, managing daily activities, or dealing with cognitive impairment. And here's something else that's important. Long term care isn't only about what happens to other people. At some point, we all need to consider what happens if I can no longer take care of myself. Now, here's the biggest mistake. People always say, it won't happen to me. One of the most common response I hear discussing long-term care is that I probably won't need it. And I understand that. We don't like imagining ourselves becoming dependent. We picture ourselves healthy, active, traveling, enjoying retirement, spending time with our families. That's the picture we want. But financial planning isn't about planning only for the outcomes we hope we that will happen. It's about preparing for the outcomes that could happen. Think about automobile insurance. You don't buy car insurance because you expect to have an accident tomorrow. You buy because you recognize that an accident is possible. Homeowners insurance, it works the same way. Life insurance works the same way. Long term care planning is similar. The goal isn't to predict that you're going to need the care. The goal is to avoid being financially and emotionally unprepared if you don't. Now, Medicare is not the answer people think it is. Here's an important misconception. People say, if I ever need long term care, Medicaid or Medicare will pay for it. That's generally not how Medicare works. Medicare may cover certain skilled care under special circumstances, but is not designed to be indefinitely for custodial long term care simply because somebody or someone needs assistance with everyday activities. That distinction can become extremely important because if someone eventually needs ongoing custodial care, the question becomes who pays? And that's where planning becomes critical. Depending on the circumstances, costs may ultimately come from personal assets, insurance benefits, Medicaid, if eligibility requirements are met, or family resources are met. The exact rules are complicated and depend upon individual circumstances. That's why this is something you want to figure out that you don't ever want to figure out after a crisis occurs. Now, the real cost of long-term care. Let's talk about something that gets people's attention. Costs. Long-term care can be expensive. The cost varies tremendously depending upon where you live, the type of care you need, how much care you need, how long you need it, whether care is provided at home or in a facility, the level of services involved. And costs can change over time. But here's the important point. Even if you never need long term care, you need to understand the potential financial consequences if you do. Let's use a hypothetical. Suppose someone spends $6,000 a month on care. That's $72,000 a year. If care continues for 3 years, that's approximately 216,000. For 5 years, that's 360,000. And that's before considering inflation or changes in the actual cost of care. Now, imagine those dollars were coming out of your retirement portfolio. What could what could you that do to your retirement plan? What could it do to your plan? And more importantly, what could it do to your spouse? Now let's talk about the spouse and the family issue. That is where the conversation becomes much more than financial. Imagine a married couple. They've worked for decades. They've saved, they've planned, they've built a retirement portfolio. They finally reached the point where they want to enjoy their lives. The one spouse needs significant long term care. Certainly, the healthy spouse becomes a caregiver. That may begin coordinating appointments, managing medication, handling transportation, helping with meals, providing personal care, managing finances, and perhaps more importantly, they may begin to sacrificing their own life, their own health, their own retirement, their own relationship, their own freedom. That's why long-term care planning isn't simply about protecting money. It's also about protecting the healthy spouse. Now, the family cost that doesn't appear on the statement. There's another cost that doesn't appear up on the financial statement. It's called caregiver burden. A daughter may take time away from work, or some may travel across the country. A spouse may stop traveling. A family member may become responsible for managing care, and families can become overwhelmed. Sometimes the greatest gifts you can give your family isn't money, it's a plan. Imagine being able to say, if something happens to me, here's what I want. Here's how I'd like to be cared for. Here's who should be contacted. And here's how we intend to pay for it. That's not pessimistic, that's responsible. Why long term care planning is really about choice. This is one of the most important concepts I want you to remember. Planning creates choices. With a plan, circumstances can they may make the decisions for you. If you have no financial strategy for long term care, you may eventually have to make decisions based primarily on what you can afford. With appropriate planning, you may be able to have more flexibility. You may be able to remain at home. You may have choices regarding the type of care you receive. You may be able to protect more than your retirement assets. You may reduce the financial burden on your family, and you may have greater control over your preferences. The purpose of planning isn't to guarantee that everything will go exactly as planned. Life doesn't work that way. The purpose is to increase your options. So, should you buy long term care insurance? Now we need to get to the question everyone eventually asks: should I buy long term care insurance? And the honest answer is it depends. There isn't one solution that's right for everyone. Your age matters, your health matters, your financial situation matters, your family situation matters, the retirement assets matter, your income matter, your risk tolerance matters, and the specific insurance policy matters. Some people may find traditional long term care appropriate. Others may consider policies that basically combine long term care benefits with life insurance and other features. Others may decide self funding is appropriate, and some individuals may have other strategies available to them. This is why I strongly recommend that you don't purchase a policy simply because someone tells you to. You need long term care insurance. Instead, ask, what risk am I trying to solve? That's a much better question. The 5 questions to ask before buying a policy. If you're considering long term care insurance, here are 5 questions I recommend asking. Question one: what exactly does the policy cover? Don't assume, read the definitions, understand what triggers benefits, understand what services qualify, understand exclusions and limitations. Question two: how much does the policy potentially pay? Understand the daily and monthly benefit, understand the maximum benefit period, understand whether benefits can increase over time, and understand how inflation protection works. Question three, when do benefits begin? Policies may have elimination periods or other conditions before benefits become payable. You need to understand those provisions before you need them. Question four, what happens if I never need long term care? This is particularly important when comparing different types of policies. Understand what premiums simply purchase a benefit or whether the policy has other features. And finally, question five, can I actually afford the premiums long term? This may be the most important question of all. Don't buy a policy that looks wonderful today, but becomes financially uncomfortable later. Your long term care strategy has to fit within your overall retirement plan. Now, the timing question. Here's another important consideration. When should you start thinking about long term care planning? The answer isn't when I need care, but then your option may be significantly different. Long-term care insurance underwriting can take health benefits and other factors in consideration, and as circumstances change, obtaining coverage may become more difficult or more expensive. That's why the conversation generally better to have before a crisis. You don't have to make a decision today, but you should understand your options while you still have options. Long term care is part of your retirement plan. I want to bring back I want to bring you back to something we talked about frequently at Pinnacle. Retirement isn't simply a financial event. It's a transition, and a comprehensive retirement plan should consider more than do I have enough money. It should also ask what happens to my health. What happens if my health changes? What happens if my spouse needs care? Where would I want to receive care? Who would help me? How will we pay for it? What happens to our retirement lifestyle? What happens to our legacy? These questions belong in the retirement conversation. Now, the three buckets. One way to think about this is to consider three potential sources for long term care. Bucket one, personal assets. You may decide to self fund care. That means setting aside sufficient assets with the understanding that you may need them to be used for care. The advantage is control, the challenge is uncertainty. You know exactly how much care you'll need or how long you'll need it. Bucket number two, insurance. Insurance can potentially transfer some of the financial risk to an insurance company in exchange for premiums and subject to the policy's terms. The benefit is risk management. The challenge is cost, underwriting, policy terms, and the possibility that you may pay premiums without ultimately receiving long term care benefits. Bucket three, public programs and other resources. Depending on circumstances, government programs may play a role, but eligibility requirements matter. And these programs should not simply be assumed to cover whatever care you want. That's why professional planning is so important. Now, the most important document you may not have. There are there's another part of this conversation that has nothing to do with insurance. It's your care plan. Have you told your family what you want? Where would you prefer to live? Would you want to remain at home? Would you consider assisted living? Would you make decisions if you couldn't? Who has access to your important information? What kind of care you want? What would you want your family to know? These are difficult questions, but having these conversations early can make a tremendous difference later. Don't let fear make the decision. I also want to emphasize something important. Long term care planning should not be driven by fear, it should be driven by clarity. You don't have to assume something bad is going to happen. You simply acknowledge that life contains uncertainty. And responsible planning means preparing for uncertainty. Think about your retirement portfolio. You diversify because you don't exactly know what the future will bring. Long term care planning is another form of risk management. You're asking, what could potentially disrupt the life I've worked so hard to create, and what can I reasonably do about it? This is a much healthier way to approach the subject. Now let's talk a little bit about your action plan. So what should you do after this presentation? I would suggest 5 simple steps. Step one, learn your risk. Understand the likelihood and potential consequences of needing extended care. Step two, understand your resources. Looking at your income, savings, retirement, accounts, investments, insurance, and other resources. Step three, discuss your wishes with your family. Don't wait until someone is sitting in an emergency room. Have the conversation while everyone is healthy. Step four, explore your options. That could include insurance, self funding, and others financial strategies or a combination. Step five, create a written plan. Don't leave your family's future dependent upon everyone remembering a conversation you had 5 years ago. Put the plan somewhere accessible. Review it periodically. Update it as your circumstances changes. The greatest gift may be a plan. So let me close with this. We spend a tremendous amount of time planning for retirement. We plan where we're going to live. We plan your investments. We plan vacations. We plan our estates. We plan our celebrations, but sometimes we fail to plan for the possibility that one day we may need help taking care of ourselves. And that's the conversation I want you to take away from today. Long term care planning isn't about expecting the worst, it's about preparing for uncertainty. It's about protecting your independence, it's about protecting your spouse, your family, and protecting your retirement lifestyle. And potentially, it's about protecting the legacy you spent decades building. So I want you to ask yourself three questions. If you needed long term care tomorrow, where would you want to receive it? Who would I want involved in my care? And perhaps the most important question, how would I pay for it? If you don't know the answers, that's okay. If you don't have all the answers today, that's okay. But know, but now you know that these are questions worth asking. Because the best time to have difficult conversation is usually before it becomes an emergency. At Pinnacle Health Transformation Group, we believe that true transformation means looking at the whole picture: your health, your wealth, your relationships, your purpose, your independence, and your happiness. Long term care planning is simply another piece of that larger life design puzzle. So don't wait until you need care. Start thinking about it. Plan while you have a choice. Plan while you have options. Plan while you can have the conversation on your terms. Because ultimately, the goal isn't simply to prepare for a longer life, it's to protect your ability to live that life with dignity, independence, connection, and choice. Thank you for joining me. And if this conversation raised questions for you, I encourage you to continue learning, speak with qualified professionals who can evaluate your individual circumstances and begin the conversation with the people who matters most. Your future deserves a plan, and your family deserves to know what the plan is. Thank you.